This garden right now is really quite beautiful. It's really come along for this part of the year. It's kind of interesting. Last year when I was out here in April, Griffin's right here, by the way, at the door, hoping to get some screen time here. And he's been out in the garden with us some during the day. I think gosh, I don't know how many plants we've put in the ground today. I've been filming them as we've been going, but it's a lot. It's a lot today. Several different videos shot on this day that will be up over the next few days. But this garden really looks really good right now. Last year, I think it was probably not until everything completely out that it was looking pretty good out here overall. I think we've really concentrated on what I talk about on things like the weekly garden planner a lot, is making sure that you have some sort of year-round things that look good. And then finding areas that there are certain times of the year just don't look good at all, and plugging something in there just to give some interest in between seasons. We have a Fatshedera called Angiostar on the other side of the door over here that's climbed up about this high. Just believe me, it's over there if you've been watching the channel for any length of time. Variegated Fatshedera. It's half Fatsia, half Hedra helix, which is English ivy. So it does not adhere to anything like English ivy or climb, or that's not invasive. It doesn't produce viable seed, but then it has the big, beautiful leaves and the flowers that Fatsia has. So there's this cool combination of the two of them. Angiostar has a pretty big leaf, and actually it takes a few years for them to really mature, but this one right here is about 5 or 6 inches across now, and I think in time gets even a little bit bigger than this. This one is called Curly. And this one's super interesting. It's not as vigorous of a viner as Angiostar and some of the green ones and some of the other variegated ones. There's a lot of Fatshedera that's been selected over the years. Sports that have come off of them, if people have identified as something different and then started rooting and cloning. This one is variegated. Slight little variegation on some of the older leaves. It actually, and you can see that right there. The leaves have to mature quite a bit for that variegation or that white edge to show up on them. It's last year's early foliage that's variegated. More of that will show up in time, but it has a much smaller leaf, and I picked this leaf just to compare in size. This one, you're looking at like 2 inches versus 5 or 6 inches there. Both are variegated. The variegation's kind of in the same spots, but of course, this one being, 10 times more leaf surface shows quite a bit more variegation, but this one again is a little less vigorous overall. It'll stand up on its own over here. I can stake it, which it already is, just like this, and leave it, or I can put something up here in time and tie it up if I want to, or whatever we want to do. These work as ground covers, okay, but really do a better job of being trained as climbers. They need to be trained as climbers because, again, they don't lock onto anything and they don't twist around anything. But there you go. This is a new Fatshedera for the garden. I love these plants. They're really super interesting. Intergenous hybrids are really, there's not a lot of them on the planet. This is literally, Fatsia and Hedra crossed together. That's why you'll see the X at the beginning. When I put the name on the screen, it says X Fatshedera. Typically you'll see Ilex X, which is a holly that's a hybrid of 2 species. When the X comes first, that means it was 2 different genus that were crossed together, which is pretty rare that anything on the planet in two different genera can be crossed together. This video, and I didn't even talk about it at the beginning, is about shade plants, except for one exception. We're going to talk about the next thing is for the sun, but our shade area here in the garden is evolving, and I'll talk about that as we go. Before we jump back into shade plants, the end of our back line back here, as you get to the north side of the property near the vegetable garden, gets really, really sunny. And we put a Chef's Choice rosemary into this space. What I'll tell you about some of these herbs, we had Salvia officinalis here, which is sage that we cook with. And it had gotten a little woody and gotten tired. We actually got a new 4-pack, so we'll be putting some back in the garden. They bloom beautifully. They're great for pollinators, and of course, it's the herb sage that we use for cooking. I got another one of these Chef's Choice rosemaries. We really, really like this plant. Rosemary's also been moved to salvia, so I just switched to salvia for a salvia. All the salvia are great, of course, because the rabbits don't eat them and the deer don't eat them, and you know, they bloom for pollinators. But the rosemary tends to bloom in the winter time. And I'll say pretty much on most of these woody herbs, like the salvia, like the rosemary, they can get a little tired in time and offer you a little less. So you can either try to reset, prune them a bit, or just plant a new one occasionally. So we took out that sage just because it, again, had been beat up a little bit. We're gonna put some over there in the vegetable garden coming up. And I really like the Chef's Choice rosemary. I think it's the right combination of good ornamental plant and culinary plant. So it was picked for its high oil content to be a good culinary rosemary. And then it was also picked because it gets about 2.5 feet tall and 3 or 4 feet wide, where a lot of the rosemary can get quite big, 3, 4, 5 feet tall. We got 5-foot ones in the neighborhood. Again, but they bloom in January, February, typically for us. And if it happens to be a warm day, the pollinators come out and take advantage of that. And of course, you get rosemary to boot. We added a couple hosta to the back line back here. When we started this project, this back line back here was extremely dry, and the first few things we put in there didn't really kill anything so much as we did things just languished for a while we got them. You know, we'd have to just water more. We realized it almost too late on a few things where they got super thin and we've had to wait for them to recover from it. But because I have the wood chips in the path and we're building these wood chips up, and I put wood chips as a barrier between the English ivy and the plants that we planted back here in the back garden, and we've mulched this repeatedly, we're starting to slightly win the battle of slightly more moist conditions. We'd still have to be really careful back here. This big southern magnolia, big white oak back here, and other things would definitely would be greedy for the water back there. But it is, all of a sudden when I dig a hole, wow, there's actually moisture down there. So that's kind of nice. So again, slowly winning that battle over. When you start in your shade garden, you really need to identify whether or not you have dry shade or moist shade. It makes all the difference in the world. A lot of our native shrubs and perennials to North and South Carolina and a lot of the Southeast actually like kind of moist shade conditions, with a lot of exceptions, but they're more that like moist than not. So you just have to be careful with what you're putting in there. And when we say water it until it gets established, keep in mind it's going to take a lot longer to become established in those spaces. We put in one of the hosta we put in is called White Feather. This one comes out and is white, and then matures into this kind of greenish white color like it is right now. This one came out of a greenhouse, so it had been forced to come up. I'm sure it was very pretty white when it came out initially, and then it had already greened up a bit when we bought it. But next year when it emerges from the ground, it'll be bright white for a few weeks before fading back into this green color, and then of course flowering later in the late spring or early summer. But that one's a super interesting hosta to go along with a very large hosta collection that's out here. This is a plant I've loved since the first time I saw it. This is a podophyllum or mayapple called Spotty Dotty, and it is one of the Asian podophyllums or mayapples. It'll get the red flowers, a slightly vigorous growth habit, more vigorous, upright, rigid habit like this one. Here's another Chinese mayapple right next to it that has the red flowers on it. So you can see this one in flower. This is what this one's going to do as well, but this one has that spotting on the leaf. We also have the native mayapples a little further down the line, and they tend to be more spring ephemeral like. Okay, meaning that they pop out of the ground, and I see a flower on it now. I'll get stuff to take some B-roll of the flowers. Our native mayapples can really spread across some ground pretty quick. Some of these Chinese mayapples are a little less aggressive overall spreading in our gardens. Good, that's good. But they do tend to be a little more heat tolerant. So they will eventually go dormant, but when we had the open garden last year, I think I mentioned this in a video last week, these were still up, and they were probably the most photographed thing in the garden, because it's just this, you know, by then the flowers are long gone and you're like, what in the heck is that thing? Because it just looks like an umbrella in the garden. But now we'll have the spotted one next to it in this space. It takes a little while on these. If you buy one of these little quart pots of these, this is maybe 3 years in the ground now, Steph. I don't really remember. It's probably 3 years for it to become that vigorous and tall. Plus, again, This spot is a little drier than they would like. They would prefer moist shade. But again, now that I'm digging back here again, you know, this year, all this organic material has started to make a difference, and there's a little more moisture, and I can see that our native Mayapples are quite a bit more happy this year than they were in the past couple years. I think this is a good view into what I'm talking about. The garden is much more mature now. A lot of things going on out here, a lot of texture, a lot of color. Again, when things were small and or asleep much later in the season, you know, over the last few years is, you know, again, we're just filling some things in with some evergreens. Things are starting to grow, fill in, you know, a tiny little azalea now has some size on it, and so on and so forth. Hydrangeas that are much more vigorous, and screening plants that have really started to fill in, although back here, not quite as much yet, but they're on their way. I mean, I think this year we're really going to have that kind of blocked off finally, and it's been years, literally years in the making, because for the first few years I didn't do anything to block it because I thought that we were going to do something else back here that we changed our mind on. I've got a couple plants that I'm not going to talk about too much because they're unavailable really in this video, but we've put in a couple trial plants for, this is an Encore Azalea that's going to be 2 years in the making, but trust me when I say this azalea, this next one, the next two are so good that, you know, I wanted to get them in the ground here because Steph and I saw this one probably 3-4 years ago, and she was like, holy moly, when this thing's in bloom, you guys are not gonna believe the color of the flowers on that Encore Azalea right there. And we'll show you, again, we'll show them to you. People are building up numbers on them, and it'll be out in the next couple of years. There's another one like that. This corner back here, again, was gonna be a greenhouse. And so last year, right before the open garden happened, we scrambled and threw some things in the ground really quickly. And that literally, when I say that's what we did, it's the 12 things that we happened to have that weren't in the ground at that time. And we put them back here. Hopefully we'll get some growth on some things. We're gonna rearrange a couple things and so on and so forth. It's a little shady back here. I'll probably come under this chair, cut this cherry back a bit that's over my head, this black cherry. Maybe cut a couple, continue to limb that southern magnolia up just a bit to make sure that I get a little, because in the early part of the day I can get good light back here, and then by about 2 in the afternoon it's shaded over from over top. High shade, you can grow anything under, you know, full sun plants, shade plants, all kinds of plants. So the oak's not the problem. That's way up here above my head, because enough light gets through that and reflected underneath it and everything else. It's these limbs that hang right down above your head. You know, those are the ones that really shade the plants out. This is a white flowering hydrangea macrophylla. It's got a bud on it already. This is a Remontant hydrangea macrophylla. It has white flower clusters about this big. And when I say it's Remontant, I've been down to the greenhouse with these several times over the past few years, and I have not seen these not in bloom. and it's kind of wild. This one's been cut back on purpose, because the only way you can prove a hydrangea is actually Remontant. Remontant means it blooms on old wood and new wood, okay? So when we think about the hydrangea next to Steph, if she'll back up right here, this is a variegated hydrangea paniculata. These bloom on new wood. So even if it got damaged during the winter time, it wouldn't matter. It's still going to flower, because as long as it's growing this spring, it'll have flowers. This one doesn't flower all that well, but I'm pointing out that paniculatas bloom. Typically, hydrangea macrophyllas, which there was one in the beginning of the video there that I showed, and it's budded up like crazy. Typical hydrangea macrophyllas bloom on old wood, last year's wood, okay? But what we've seen here is Remontant ones that will not only bloom on the old wood, but even if they get damaged, even if your husband cuts them down and by accident, you know, hacking up, meatballing your entire garden in the wintertime, no matter what, you'll still end up with some flowers on them. And so this is one of the Remontant ones. But the only way to prove that a hydrangea is Remontant, okay, because there's a lot of them out there on the world that people say are Remontant, because they have a tendency to occasionally throw a late flower. That doesn't make it Remontant, really. The only way to prove it is to have them bloom out in the spring, you know, in May or whenever they bloom in your area, and then cut the thing to the ground. Literally cut it to the ground, and then let it come back out and see what it will do. And if it comes back into full flower again, or somewhere, maybe not full flower because it'd be a hotter part of the summer, but it should put on some new flowers and flower throughout the summer and into the early fall. And this one right here, cut it back, bloomed heavily, cut it back, and it's already budding up as it's got new growth on it this long already. So it's kind of cool. You can actually see it in certain plants, and I know I just ran my mouth a lot about that, but it's kind of cool because we've seen, because a lot of folks, like in zone 5, hydrangea macrophylla, sometimes they get burned in the winter time, or even here we'll get a late freeze on them. Like it's April 15th, 14th as I'm filming this, and that thing's fully budded up. It's within the realm of possibility it could get knocked back. But okay, a couple more plants. I think maybe 3 more real quick before we wrap this video up. This is a new holly called Nellyette. So it's kind of a smaller growing version of Nelly R. Stevens holly, which has been one of the most popular hollies in the history of this business, almost certainly. One of the biggest selling plants for me, I know, as a grower, growing them all those years. This one has slightly more vigorous upright habit, so it's going to stay slightly more narrow, and I think you can see that even in the growth in this container that I just put in the ground. It'll flower pretty soon, and then of course has a pretty heavy berry set. But this is going to be the perfect upright narrow holly for somebody who wants one that's more like 8 to 12 feet rather than 12 to 20 feet, okay? And a slightly narrower where Nelly tends to be a little bit broader at the base. So I think this is gonna be a big seller. I know a lot of the growers are already growing this one. We saw, Steph and I toured a bunch of nurseries earlier this year, and it was a question we had as we were going, are you doing Nellyette? And almost all of them had ordered liners in. So I think we're gonna see this one, a lot of them out in the trade. And this, I think it's gonna be an easier plant for growers to grow too, because it's a little more vigorously upright. Nelly in a 3-gallon container is a hard plant to grow. It's not really until you get a Nelly Stevens holly about this big that it starts to really take that shape that we know about, we know of them. When they're small, they tend to just have a mind of their own. This one I think will be a little easier for growers to clone. And so if you're buying 6 of them for a screen and you buy 6 small ones, they're all gonna look alike even as small plants. So I find that kind of interesting. I think you can see back here behind me this back path really starting to come together. It has been a long time in the making to get this this space. Again, we're just fighting the elements some, and you'll have spaces like this in your garden. It's just kind of normal. And then you'll put things in the wrong place and all kinds of things. But I think now this really has started to look good. I like these long range views on these paths. It's one of the things behind Steph is that building, my neighbor's building back there. Eventually we'll have this, I think before this year's over, we'll have a lot of it blocked finally. And then, these long range views in the path, you really want them to look, we've got an Indian hawthorn back there at the, a Japanese maple back there at the end of this line that'll eventually be a large line of sight piece for that path. So when you're thinking about your path layouts, also think about putting something at the end of them that kind of lures a person to it, right? And we've done that back here as well. What is that hosta called, that other hosta, Touch of Class? Okay, the other hosta that got put on the back line back here is this Touch of Class hosta. And you want to get closer and show them that one, Steph? That's a pretty variegated hosta. I love that blue and that kind of chartreuse center on that leaf. That's one that I really drawn to. We've got a couple that are slightly similar to it, but not exactly like it. But again, our hosta collection is almost becoming laughably large at this point. It's just hard to resist them. There's so many cool hosta out there in the world, and so many different shapes and sizes, and now red petioles and fragrant flowers and non-fragrant flowers and so on and so forth. So hosta number, I don't have any idea, but hosta number a lot. That's what that one is. So one more plant in this video. We moved this viburnum nudum that was back here, this tall, over to the native garden. If you're following along with the native project, it is leafed out. That thing didn't miss a beat. I didn't cut it back at all, and it didn't miss a beat. I'm amazed at that thing over there. We've got a lot of native plants that are piling up for that as well. So there'll be a video from that garden pretty soon. There was another hydrangea paniculata white wedding here. We just didn't need there was 3 of them originally here. And we also took out a butterfly bush that we had kind of tired on a bit over time. I've got a couple, but it's opened up a big space here in this middle bed in the back. And you see the little honey hydrangea, oakleaf hydrangea back here. I think it originally got stepped on maybe twice. Deer ate it to the ground. All kinds of various things have happened to that plant, and it's a survivor. It is a true survivor. It lives on. I'm gonna slide it out from that. The acanthus back here is trying to eat it, so I keep hitting that rock. I'm gonna move that oakleaf hydrangea out in the next week or 2, and then we added another oakleaf hydrangea in here. I think we're gonna get a camellia that's upright and narrow to go into this space. We'll show you that when the time comes. This oakleaf hydrangea is in the Southern Living Plant Collection. It's called Snowcicle. It's really cool. It is a really cool oakleaf hydrangea. It has really crazy long inflorescences on it that are double flowers. Incredibly, incredibly showy plant. Great fall foliage. A great version of our great native plant. These bloom on old wood, so this is another one you don't want to be cutting on during the winter time. This one's budded up, and it's got at least 2 flowers are coming so far. It just has leafed out, so it's going to be another week or 2 before we know how many flowers we're going to get. They won't be that big this year. It's such a small plant that went in the ground, but it's a nice plant. It's a good looking plant, so I'm happy to have it. I've seen this one for several years and wanted to get my hands on one. It's hardy in zone 6 to 9. I saw on the person who represents this plant. I don't know why it wouldn't be hardy in zone 5. Typically oakleaf hydrangeas are hardy in zone 5, so I might have to ask that question because I know the person pretty well. In the deep south, these typically are kind of semi-evergreen, and they'll get that burgundy color on them and kind of hold it through the winter time. We were down in North Florida a few weeks ago, and the oakleaf hydrangeas are just singing in January and February, you know, with the beautiful leaves from last year still on them through the winter time. Then the new leaves come on and push them off. Up in the north, obviously they're going to lose every leaf on it, but that Snowcicle oakleaf hydrangea had been on my list for a while, and we finally got our hands on one. So there you go. There's some of the outside of the rosemary. The rosemary needs lots of sun. I think everything else in this video, well, even that Nellyette, holly would probably prefer a lot more sun than it's about to get, but it'll be totally fine back there. I can shear it and keep it tight. This is a variegated Oakland holly here, and it's in a lot of shade as well, and look how nice it looks. You know, I've never sheared that thing. We did cut it. We did take a limb off the top of it because it was reaching up big and tall this winter, but other than that, this thing hasn't been pruned on at all. You can see how full it is. As long as it's happy, you're keeping it mulched, you're keeping it reasonably moist, you know, these things will bloom in the shade just fine. It'll probably cost me some berries. Overall, it's not going to bloom as much in the shade, but I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. So the rosemary, that Nellyette, would prefer a little more sun. Everything else, I think in this video, would prefer part shade or even shade conditions. And there you go. There's our evolving backline shade area that's really been, it was early on a battle, and now all of a sudden I can dig holes back here and put things in the ground and feel pretty confident that they're going to take hold without us constantly having to worry about it. Thanks for watching.